Az-zakah. Zakah, the third pillar of Islam, an obligation upon all of us. It is what? 2.5%, or you could say 1/40th of your total savings annually. Now, on the personal basis, it's a beautiful thing because calculating your zakah is a process of self-realization and purification. And on a public scale, the zakah stimulates the economy and reduces hoarding and prevents people from making their cash stagnate. It prevents the stagnation of wealth. So let's go through it so we can all understand this very important obligation. Number one, who pays zakah? Who pays zakah? The answer to that is a Muslim. In other words, a non-Muslim living in a, let's say, Islamic state does not pay zakah, they pay jizya. So there's a certain type of tax, for the believer, but then there is one for the non-believer. So the Muslim pays zakah, but the disbeliever does not. You have to be free. In other words, you cannot be a slave. And number three, you have to be above the nisab level for a full year. Now, what does the nisab level mean? What does it mean? Nisab means the minimum liable amount. The minimum liable amount. You have to be above that minimum amount for the whole year. So your money can go up and down above that amount, and then you're considered liable. If it ever dips below it at any point in the year, then you're basically considered what? You're considered somebody who is financially unstable. Sometimes you have lots of money, sometimes you have almost no money. And so if you're unstable and you have these big dips, then such a person is considered not liable for zakah. However, if your money goes up and down, but it's always remaining above the nisab level, then you are considered liable. And when I say for a full, well, let me get to that in a moment. What is the nisab level? How much is it? How much money must it be? So there's two opinions on this. There's the most popular method, or popular amount, but that seems to be the weaker opinion. So what is the popular amount? The popular method is to take 20 dinars of gold, 20 dinars, each dinar being what? 4.245 grams of gold. And when you multiply it out by 20, you get 85 grams of gold. 85 grams of gold, you figure out its marketplace, the value of it on the marketplace today. And if you check it, actually yesterday, it was how much? $3,913. That's of yesterday. That's USD. So once you've calculated that, you realize that yes, for the whole year, I have been above $3,913, therefore I am zakah eligible. However, there is a different method, which is based on silver, based on 200 dirhams of silver. One dirham weighing 2.97 grams. And when you multiply it out, you get 595 grams of silver, and that's equivalent to, if you go to silverpriceoz.com, you find out that as of this morning, that's worth $499.80, basically $500. So that seems to be the stronger opinion. I know I threw a lot of numbers at everybody, but the bottom line is this, that the stronger opinion for this year, for today, right now, is that the nisab level, wallahu ta'ala alam, for right now is what? $500. So if you know, if let's say you're paying your zakah money today, then that would mean that you check, have I had over $500 in my savings all year? If the answer is yes, then you are liable for zakah. I hope that's clear. Now, when it comes to the whole year, there's a few questions that need to be answered. First and foremost, we're not talking about the solar year, we're talking about the lunar year. So you don't say I'm going to do it at the 1st of January every year, because that's solar, that's not lunar. So you have to say something like, I'm going to pick my date, and it's your responsibility. We don't live in an Islamic state that they've picked the date. You have to pick your own date. So a lot of people use Ramadan because Ramadan is something that, it's a time to give. So they say, okay, let's say for simplicity's sake, you pick the 1st of Ramadan. Now you are liable every year on the 1st of Ramadan to check your savings, to calculate your savings and to give. So let's pick that date just because it's simple. Ramadan 1st, let's say. Okay, good. So we picked Ramadan 1st. And so now we begin to calculate have we stayed above the nisab level for the year prior to that. Now, quick point. Technically, you could do something like, you know what I'll do? I'll give a gift of money from my savings to, let's say a friend of mine, just so I'm beneath the nisab level for that specific date, and then he'll give me back the money. This is exactly what Bani Israel did when they try to lawyer the Bible. Please don't try to lawyer God. SubhanAllah, this is how you become maghdubi alayhim. So don't become like this, inshallah ta'ala. This should be common sense. The point is that you should just let your money be the way it is, and inshallah figure out where your money is at. So now the question is, how do I calculate the actual amount of money? What is considered part of my savings? There are four types of money. Four types of money that you need to pay attention to. Cash and cash equivalents is number one. Cash and cash equivalents. Number two is business inventory. Business inventory. Number three is livestock. And number four is crops and yields. How much yields you get from your crop. Now, as for the last two, I'm going to assume most people aren't farmers. So I'm not going to go into the details of how to calculate your zakah based on your livestock or based on your yields from your crops. If you are a farmer, then you're going to have to do that on your own. You have to research that matter. Today we're just going to deal with the first two, which is what? Cash and cash equivalents and your business inventory. So what is considered part of your cash or cash equivalent? It is any amounts of gold or silver, and by the way, I mean pure gold and silver, because oftentimes people have gold or silver that is impure. You have to actually find out how pure it is and how much actual gold you have. So your gold in your possession, your silver, and then all fiat currencies. The word fiat means what? Decreed by authority, basically decreed by a government. Any institutionalized, legitimate, currency, not monopoly money, basically, real money. And what we use today is what? USD, right? Most people would be USD. But it could be that you have another account in some other country. I don't know, maybe you have an account in Saudi that has riyals, right? Or whatever the case is. You have to put it all into one USD value amount and figure out what is the total. Based on your gold, based on your silver, and based on all currencies, you figure out what is the total USD amount and compare it to the nisab level. And then if it's above, and if it's been above the whole year, then you're going to take 2.5%. But it doesn't stop there. What else do you add to that savings? Credit card points. Credit card points, why? Because they are cash equivalent, right? You could always take those points and then cash them out and then get that amount. What doesn't count is, for instance, precious stones. You have jewelries and rubies and diamonds, doesn't make a difference. And yes, so that's in terms of your cash or cash equivalents. What about your inventory? This is called urud al-tijara. Urud al-tijara. Your inventory, what does this mean? So those of you that own businesses, you will have many things that have value of that business. There's going to be the land, there's going to be the building itself, there's going to be, let's say, the cash register, there's going to be the chairs in the business, there's going to be tables. None of that counts. All those possessions, whether those possessions are at your house, let's say the land, the house, the car, your clothes, your laptop, your phone, all those things, don't worry about it. Allah is so merciful, He didn't charge us for any of those things. But when it comes to one thing in the store, which is what? Your actual inventory. So let's say you sell shoes. So if you sell shoes, then you go to your store and you figure out what is the cash total of all the shoes that I have on the walls that are on display and back in the stock room. Let's say you calculate that you have $10,000 worth of shoes. That's considered your savings. That's considered part of your currency. Why? Because you deal in shoes every day, right? And this applies to the shoes that you sell. This applies to whether you sell phones, whether you sell, it doesn't matter what it may be. And it can also be, by the way, and this is where things get a little bit complicated, it can also be your land. So for example, the land of your home, no, you don't calculate that. But let's say if you're a real estate agent and you buy and sell land regularly, if you are buying and selling land regularly, then the day that your hawl or your year comes up, let's say Ramadan first, if that's your day, the day that comes up, you check, okay, which of the properties have I bought and that I'm ready to sell? So let's say you regularly buy and sell properties, and now you have 3 in your possession. Yes, the total cost of those things, they are considered your quote-unquote inventory. Even though they're not in boxes like the shoes are, they're still part of your inventory. Why? Because you buy and sell them regularly. So even though they're plots of land, yes, they're considered part of your inventory. I hope that's clear. And this also applies to what? Active investments. Active investments. Oh, by the way, before I continue, I should mention, this is not the case for things that are under contract. So for example, going back to our guy with the shoe store, he has, let's say, a bunch of shoes that are already bought under contract. They will be sold later. Those are considered sold. So that does not go into his inventory. You do not calculate that. Now, going to investments. Let's say you have shares. But let's say you're a stockbroker and you buy and you sell shares regularly. Because you buy and you sell them regularly, it's also similar to that currency, just like the guy buying and selling shoes, or just like the guy buying and selling phones regularly. Whatever you have in your possession on that date, on your day of the year, let's say Ramadan first, that day you say to yourself, okay, what is the total amount that I have in terms of these shares? You calculate that, and that is also considered part of your savings. Why? Because you are buying and selling them regularly. And they're considered a liquid asset, meaning they can convert into cash quickly, and the cost to do so is minimal. Therefore, they're treated like cash. This is in contrast of what? This is in contrast to passive investments. Passive investments include mutual funds, ETFs, pensions, 401ks, IRAs, any sort of shares, property, or stock that are held for longer than a year, right? Because the whole thing's based on a year. If you hold these stocks or property or shares or your pension or whatever the case is, if you're holding it for more than a year, then these are considered passive investments. And so what do you do with the passive investments? The passive investments, there is a difference of opinion. Two opinions that I'm aware of. One is that since you don't have access to it, it's not al-milk al-tam, it's not cash that you have like in your account that you can just spend comfortably. Usually these things are tied up in such a way where to take out the money there would be all sorts of penalties and fees, and so therefore, since you do not have full possession, it is more considered like a debt. And so therefore, because it's more similar to a debt, then you treat it like it's not zakat payable. It's not considered part of your savings. Yes, only once you get the payoff, once you receive the money from that investment, and it goes into your account, and now it's actual cash in your account, then you wait for the actual date of zakat to come, and that now you are zakat liable, or it is zakatable assets. But prior to that, it is considered not. It is considered similar to a debt. It is invested and tied up into something, and it is growing. It's doing what it's supposed to do. And this, you can see the wisdom behind this perspective. The wisdom is to say what? The wisdom is to say, zakat is meant to prevent people from hoarding. Zakat is meant to prevent people from hoarding. That is the idea, and Allah knows best. Yes. And so subhanAllah, as long as the money is moving or invested or still growing, then inshallah ta'ala, it is not stagnant. And this is why, by the way, people that are liable for zakah money, I noticed when we were talking about who is liable, we never mentioned gender, we never mentioned age, so even a baby, and we never even mentioned sanity. So if somebody theoretically is crazy but they have a lot of money that's stagnating, it's just sitting there, such a person, they're the person that's responsible for them. They're the ones who have to do what? They have to take a look at all that money that's been saved, take the necessary amount, the 1/40th or 2.5% a year, or let's say a baby that's been given a huge trust fund. The money can't stagnate. It can't just sit there. It has to continuously move. It has to be invested into something. It has to be spent in some sort of way. And this, again, stimulates the economy. And so, yes, I hope that is clear. And wallahu ta'ala a'lam. The other opinion is what? That you must pay zakah on the zakatable assets of that company. I know this is a bit complicated, but let me go back to that example of the guy who owns the shoe store. So let's say you have this guy, and he owns his shoe store, and like I said, he's got the whole business, which is a certain large amount of money, but then only $10,000 worth of, let's say, actual inventory. This individual, inshallah ta'ala, let's say he has people who want to invest in him. He says, I want to buy shares of your company. I have 1% of your company. So the answer is, from that 1% share, what percentage is represented in the actual stock inventory? That's upon you to decide, that's upon you to calculate. You have to calculate how much of that percentage you owe based on how much of the actual company is worth in inventory, and Allah knows best. So that is something for you to figure out. And the final question that I want to answer in this first khutbah is what? Debt. How much money do you, how do you calculate the money that is in debt? The answer is this. There's a difference between good debt and bad debt. Good debt implies what? Money that you can pick up whenever you want. So if I lend somebody $500, and then that guy says, listen, I have your $500, just come grab it whenever you want, And I say, oh, don't worry about it, I'll see you when I see you. That's considered good debt, and that's considered money that's in my account. So I should go get that money and put it in my account and then consider it zakat eligible, because I'm responsible for it. However, if somebody keeps saying, oh, don't worry, I'll pay you back soon. Don't worry, I'll pay you back as soon as I can. Then this is considered bad debt, and the person, you have no idea whether they'll pay you or not. So when the zakat day comes, that money is not considered yours. It's considered theirs until they finally actually give it to you, even if they owe it to you. So this needs to be kept in mind. Now, what about your mortgage? Your mortgage is something that you pay off over many, many years. So no, you can't say to yourself, oh, I have, 10 years to pay off $500,000, therefore $500,000, I'm always in the hole, therefore I'm never zakat eligible, because I'm always in the negative. That doesn't work like that. Since zakah is on a yearly basis, you have to take a look at, when the day comes, how much do I owe on a monthly basis? Pay your bills. How much do I owe on a quarterly basis? Pay those bills. How much do I owe on a yearly basis? Pay those bills, and now calculate your zakah. Now calculate your zakah. After you've paid whatever bills you have, now you calculate it. But you don't say, oh, in the next 10 years I'm going to be paying this much, therefore I'm never zakah eligible. You can't do that. I hope that is clear. And inshallah, in the next khutbah, we will clarify who is eligible for zakah. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam kathira. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Who is eligible? So let's first talk about who is not eligible. The first person who is not eligible are those who are part of the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You cannot give money, and those people, you should know who you are, whether you're a Sayyid or a Sharif, whether you're from the lineage of the Prophet ﷺ through Hassan or Hussein, you should know who you are, and you should know that you are not eligible to take any zakah money. That's first and foremost, that category. After that, anybody who you are responsible for. So now that you've taken a look at your savings, now that you've taken a look at your investments, or let's say your inventory, now that you've calculated your full savings, now you've taken 2.5%, you've taken 1/40th, and now you have this cash money, who do you want to give it to? You can't give it to your son. You can't give it to your wife. You can't give it to your parents. Why? Because you're responsible to pay for those people already. I hope that's clear. You're not allowed to give it to them. Who can you give it to? People that you're not responsible for and who are needy. And Allah Ta'ala describes those categories in Surah At-Tawbah, ayah number 60. What's interesting, by the way, is that a wife can give it to her husband, because a wife is not liable, she's not responsible to support her husband. The husband's meant to support the wife. And so there is a case in the life of the Prophet ﷺ where a woman came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, Ya Rasulullah, I have a certain amount of money. Because of that, I am zakah eligible, but there's nobody else my husband is very broke. He is liable for zakah. Can I give it to him? And the answer is yes. So the wife can. So what are the 8 categories of people that Allah Ta'ala describes in Surah At-Tawbah, ayah number 60, who are zakah eligible? Allah says, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل. So Allah says that zakah is to be paid upon these 8 categories. Number 1, al-fuqara, the faqir. The person who is absolutely broke, who has no money whatsoever. And he's number 1 for a reason. Because when you have the least, then you deserve it the most. So I hope that's clear. The one who is destitute. After that is the miskin, or masakin is the plural. The miskin person is the one who is in need. He may have a job, he may have an income, he may have a car, but he may be also under the nisab level. He may not have, that's one way of calculating. You could say, well, he's under the nisab level. That means his money goes up and down, and he is living just barely getting by. Or you could also say that he is living paycheck to paycheck, or that he is struggling. This is what determines a person being miskin. And it's also good to know the people in your area, in your locality, who may be miskin. The third category is who? Al-amilina alayha, the employees who are meant to collect this zakah money. Such individuals who are employed to do so, they are supposed to be paid no more than 1/8, because there's 8 categories. They can't get a bigger share than everybody else. They have to make sure they only get a share that is, relative to them. But still, this is in an Islamic government, so it doesn't necessarily apply to us. Who else? Al-mu'allafati qulubuhum. Those who we want to make their hearts are already inclining towards Islam, and we just want to push over the edge with some sort of support. So such a person, let's say a non-Muslim who is studying Islam, learning about Islam, and you want to warm them up to Islam. You want to make sure that they know that the Muslims will support them, will take care of them, that it's safe to embrace Islam. So what can you do? You can help them by financially. Others say that this is in reference to who? People that are, like I said, hesitating. Or some people say you could even put in this towards campaigns that fight against bigotry. Now this is more, you could say questionable. Others say that this is for recent converts, and this includes also convert classes, and Allah knows best. These are different possibilities. But this should not go towards necessarily, let's say, for example, a da'wah organization. Generally speaking, you want to give this to people, not organizations, because all 8 categories are of people. That's number 4. Number 5 is what? Ar-riqab, people that are enslaved, people in bonds. And what should you do? You should help to pay the ransom of somebody who's trying to get out of jail, or perhaps pay an organization that is fighting against child labor. These are all relevant in the category of fir riqab. After that, you have al-gharimin. Al-gharimin means those who are in debt. So people who are in debt, people who are drowning in medical bills, people who are just had a disaster and their home was ruined and now they have all sorts of debt. You can help them out as well, inshallah ta'ala. Fi sabilillah is a reference to warriors. Generally speaking, classically, this is the position that this is in reference to people who are formal Muslim army headed by a legitimate Islamic government, a legitimate Islamic state. The problem is that since we don't have such a situation nowadays, it is much more likely that we can open it up as Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal did and said, fi sabilillah is for helping people in different paths. Like for example, the position of Imam al-Nawawi. Imam al-Nawawi held the position that fi sabilillah can include the students of knowledge. So for instance, let's say you know somebody who wants to study Islam and they don't have the money to go study overseas or whatever the case is. You can take your zakah money and give it to that individual and they can go study Islam bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. And then finally, wabn as-sabil. Wabn as-sabil means the wayfarer or the traveler. This can refer to refugees, people in exile, or somebody who just can't get home. This doesn't have to be a poor person. This can be somebody who has lots of money back home, but they have no access to that money. So you help them with your zakah money so that they can go along their way, get a plane ticket, and so on and so forth. So these are the 8 categories of those who you can give your money to. So now I hope it's clear how we calculate the amount, what is actually considered zakah eligible in terms of our actual savings, how to calculate above the nisab level, how to pick a date and to stick to that date, and then who to give it to. And the final question that we want to ask ourselves is what? Do we give it directly or indirectly? And there's benefits to both. When you give it directly, you can give it to family members, obviously not those family members that you're responsible for, but you can give it to other family members. For example, you have, let's say, an uncle who has no money, right? So now you're doing 2 things. You're giving zakat to the person who's needy, but you're also helping out a family member who you're not responsible for. So that's good. Giving directly is also good because you can help the people in your community, in your locality. You can get to know them. You can give them the dignity of spending that money the way they want to. That's also very good too. That's a blessing, to give them the money and say, you do it the way you want, as opposed to giving to an organization, and then that organization will determine how those funds are spent. So it's very good to give it directly, and especially because it says, li, lil fuqara, wa lil masakin, li, it's for them. And then, indirectly is also a good method for other reasons. If you give it indirectly, then you have the ability to get a receipt and use that for filing your taxes. And then you could obviously get more money from that and then inshallah ta'ala invest even more inshallah in the future. So that's pretty good. Another reason why you might want to give it to an organization is to get a receipt, and then you can inquire about a corporate matching program. There are many corporations that will match whatever money you've given. They will match it. So if you want to double or triple your charitable expense, these are all different ways to do so. So inshallah ta'ala, I hope we've covered the necessary topics. I hope it's clear what zakah is, how much it's worth, who pays it, what is the nisab level, how we calculate it, the how it's a year on the lunar year, and how you have to calculate that yourself. What are the different categories of zakatable items and money that you have to actually figure out in terms of cash and cash equivalents, in terms of your inventory, and in terms of your investments, and how you deal with your debt. And I hope we figured out, inshallah ta'ala, who is eligible. So this is very important. And I know I kind of went through this quickly, and I apologize if things weren't 100% clear. There was some things that I stumbled about a little bit, unfortunately. But hopefully the main objective is to do what? Is to make people realize that this is a very important topic. The main objective is for you to ask questions, to say, how does this apply to me? Let me clarify the issues that are unclear. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of those who give our zakah every year. May Allah ta'ala make us of those who are free from any sort of liabilities. May Allah ta'ala make us understand that this is not our money, that Allah ta'ala has loaned it to us, and that a certain percentage of it is not ours, it belongs to the needy. May Allah ta'ala make us of those who purify our wealth through zakah. آمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وبارك لنا فيما أعطيت وقنا شر ما قضيت فإنك تقضي ولا يقضى عليك إنه لا يذل من واليت ولا يعز من عاديت تباركت ربنا وتعاليت ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا وأقم الصلاة.